Good evening and welcome to the March 24th, 2021 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. This meeting is being held in a hybrid format due to the COVID pandemic, so you can see us live by the few people that are in the audience, on TV, and also online via Zoom. You can also join by phone, so we have lots of options tonight. So with that, we'll call the meeting to order. Karen?
Mr. Hartley is absent tonight. Holst? Here. Larson? Leeper?
Here.
Lynch?
Here.
Prideaux? Saul? Here. Schrod?
Here.
Sears?
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. Thank you, Karen.
Prideaux is also here.
Oh, Leslie's just signed on to Zoom.
Welcome, Leslie. All right, thank you, Karen. With that, we'll call the meeting to order. We have a couple of meeting minutes. One, the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on March 10th, and then the work session minutes on March 3rd. I would entertain comments or a motion to approve.
Motion to approve? Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Minutes pass. At this time, we'll open it up to public comments on items not related to the agenda. So if you have comments, you can join via Zoom. You can raise your hand, or you can join via your phone. And those directions are on the website. Do we have anyone?
We can start with.
Not related to the agenda, so. If you do, come up to the microphone and give your name and address, please.
Just speak into the microphone so people in the Zoom can hear.
Okay. My name is Carol Weisenberger, and I live at 1010 West 13th Street. And a concern that is occurring in our neighborhood and maybe some other neighborhoods is the appearance of Airbnbs in the community. And we're not talking about a private room in a house. We're talking about the entire house. And this, in our neighborhood right next to me, started at the beginning of last year. And the gentleman that owned the property and moved away had sought a rental permit. And he was given approval for renting to 3 people. But soon after that, we saw on the Airbnb site, he's having 10 guests are eligible to come into the house and stay. And there's been times over the past year that there have been more than the 3 that the city approved. And I approached the city and talked to the various people in the planning and zoning department numerous times, and they pointed out that the city doesn't seem to have a real plan or policy towards Airbnbs, and yet we're concerned that this could be a growing problem if the entire house. It's kind of destabilizing to the neighborhood. You're literally living next to a motel. People are coming and going, and this is just in the COVID time. So our concern is if without a policy there, this would get worse over the next in the future, and we feel that we're not the only ones that are going to experience this. A couple times, numerous people had stayed there, and they had guests over, and we could count 10 to 12 cars on the street at various times, and then a lot of coming and going. So again, our concern is what kind of policy can be developed, and it is also, I should be pointing out, he sold the house in December, and no for sale sign went up. But when we looked into where it was sold to, the deed holder now is an Air JB. And so don't know what's going on there, whether he actually sold it or went into a corporation. So our concern again is we're a residential neighborhood and we're not commercially zoned, and what's the city going to do?
Okay, thank you, Carol. Karen, has the city had time to look into this matter, or is maybe move down the road?
So we are looking into this particular issue. We don't have any specific regulations about Airbnbs, but we do have some regulations on the book that we can use for enforcement.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Do we have any other public comments that not related to the agenda? If you come up to the mic and your name and address.
Yvonne Nava-Pettigrew, and I live at 1115 West 12th. In addition to what Carol just stated, the fact that it's not regulated, the fact that we do have regulations for rental properties, number of cars parked, spaces for parking, is the amount of trash. Just walking by the property, just on a normal walk around the neighborhood, the fact that they're not residents, they're using the recycling trash bin and the recycling trash, plus leaving trash on the street that the city does not pick up because they're not on the appropriate container. So it's not only the overflowing trash that is contaminating our streets, but it's also the fact that they're not using the containers properly.
All right, thank you. Do we have any other public comments online or in the room?
I don't see any online.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move to old business. We have, the first item is the Central Business District Overlay Site Plan Review for a new mixed-use building in 7th and Main. And we have had a request to defer that item to a future meeting while they resolve and address the parking issues. So I would entertain a motion to defer.
So moved.
Motion, we defer it. Second.
A motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, that motion will be deferred to a future meeting. Second item on the old business is land use, map amendment, and rezoning from M4 to Highway 1, and that's at 7709 Nordic Drive. This item, we also want to consider continuing for public hearing to the next meeting at the applicant's request. So would entertain a motion to do so.
Motion to defer?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, with that, we'll move to new business. The first item on the new business is Central Business District Overlay Design Review for 302 Main signs. Who is going to be presenting the item?
Mr. Adedoria is going to be reviewing that tonight. I would ask Julie if she would allow me to share the screen. Let's see, where's her?
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be presenting this tonight. This is JD. This case for Central Business District Design Review is for the 302 Main Street for tenant Lincoln Savings Bank. The contractor Science and Design has submitted the design review application for a new projecting sign over public right-of-way and a wall sign on the eastern facade of the building. In the next slide, I would just like to give some background information about this project. So you might recall this. This is a new building on 302 Main Street, and this was just approved in 2019. At the time of approval, the the two elevations that you see on the screen were approved with the required signage for the building. As the one on the left is along the main street, and one along the right image is along the 3rd Street. So as you can see, there were no other signs apart from this was proposed. So typically, signage is not a part of the review process, but in this case, because we are having a new projecting sign and also a new wall sign, which was not approved back then, that is the reason why we are reviewing this today. In the next slide, I would just run by the proposal. So the two signs, one is projecting, which will be along the main street. That will be just be under the canopy, which is already projecting about 3 feet. And the other would be the wall sign, which would direct the drive-through for Lincoln Savings Bank. The wall sign is not lighted. It's just going to be the channel letters, whereas the projecting sign is going to be having lighted letters. In the next slide, I would just run by a few more details about these two proposed signs. In the next slide, the projecting sign is approximately projecting about 3 feet over public sidewalk and will have clear distance about 12 feet. And it's about 4 square feet in area, whereas the wall sign is to be placed along the eastern facade to indicate drive-through is about 27 square feet. And so those are the configurations of the sign. According to the code, both the signs are allowed as per code, so both looks okay. We have determined that. So in our next slide, the Community Development Department recommends approval of the submitted design review application for the new signage requested for tenant Lincoln Savings Bank at 302 Main Street. And just so everybody knows, if this is approved tonight, we might move this to the next scheduled council meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has. Thank you.
JD, neither sign is lit, right?
The projecting sign, which is under the canopy, is lit.
Is it backlit?
No, it's just the channel letters will be lit. The background will be not. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
So
JD.
not really, it won't really be very, just be lightly lit, so it won't project down on the sidewalk or anything like that.
Yeah, that's correct.
I think both signs are very professionally done, so I would recommend we approve of it.
Let's, do we have any other commissioner questions for staff? Is there anyone from the applicant that would like to speak? No one online?
No one online?
All right, anyone from the public that would like to speak to this item? All right, we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion or a motion.
I make a motion we approve and send on to city council.
I would second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion will move forward to city council. Thank you. Second item of new business is rezoning from A1 agricultural district and R1 residential district to an MU mixed-use residential district, and to update the Pinnacle Prairie master plan to include this new area. Who is presenting on this tonight?
I'm sorry, I turned my mic on. This is Karen. I will be presenting this item tonight. As the commission may recall, there was a similar item on your agenda several months ago for rezoning for this particular property. And this is the location of that property. It's along Cedar Heights Drive, just north of Huntington Road intersection. The proposal is to rezone 12 acres from A1 to mixed use, and the east portion of that 3 acres from R1 to mixed use, The A1 is, of course, our holding zone, our ag zone, until municipal services are accessible to the site. And the R1 is our low-density residential district. The mixed-use residential zoning district allows for a master planned residential on larger tracts of land. And as you are aware, the Pinnacle Prairie development is in this location, and the current owner of the property would like to incorporate this new area into the larger Pinnacle Prairie master plan. The commission reviewed this, as I said, last fall, and part of that review was to look at the future land use map in this location. There's some, the future land use map currently designates this area as a combination of planned development, office park, and business park, and greenways and floodplain. That boundary, as you can see on this map, is rather irregular, and they would like to incorporate this into the larger planned development area. So at that time, when you reviewed it previously, you agreed with that and voted to recommend that change to the future land use map. We've held that item knowing that the developer was interested in kind of regrouping and revising their concept. And if it does then pass from the commission on this particular rezoning request, we would forward both of those items to the council at the same time. So with this, they've asked to refine the master plan. As you know, the owner of a property with this mixed-use residential zoning has to simultaneously submit a comprehensive development master plan along with the rezoning request. So with this, they've refined the concept plan for the villages portion of the Pinnacle Prairie site, and they're updating the 2015 master plan, and they proposed a new concept that indicates the proposed street layout, shared open space, and regional stormwater management facilities for this area. And the proposed distribution of housing types and land uses, and that delineation of the floodplain. And then along with this, when it goes to council, we would be updating that developmental procedures agreement that went with the larger master plan. Here we have that 2015 master plan for Pinnacle Prairie. You can see it's a really large area that's being planned for. So this is taking a number of years to develop, and every so often is a really good idea to revisit those master plans to make sure that they're staying on track, or if anything needs to be adjusted over time. So here's the 2015, that was an adjustment to the master plan, and now we're here 6 years later to adjust it one more time. As you can see, here is the aerial photograph of the current build out of that area, so you can see there is still quite a bit of land yet to redevelop. So with the new concept plan, the Pinnacle Prairie East area, the street network and traffic circulation, the 2015 master plan really illustrated major roadway alignments, the access locations and proposed intersections for major streets. The other potential streets in that 2015 plan were just conceptually shown with arrows. The lots and blocks were not illustrated, so it was kind of difficult to understand how the streets and trails and parks, how that would all function together as a whole. So now they're refining that concept plan to address these issues. And this then would be a precursor to the next step of the process, which is the preliminary plat stage. So this was the previous concept plan that you saw last fall. And the reason that it failed, I think there was a lot of really positive things about the concept that they had proposed. The one sticking point was that there's no east-west street connection all the way across the entire 600 acres. So that was one of the reasons that I know there was a lot of discussion at the commission and a lot of different thoughts about that, but in the end that this one failed for that reason. So they've come back and looked at this more carefully and come up with a new concept that now shows that east-west street connection going all the way across, extending Prairie View Drive. So this is an adjustment has a lot of the same features. The land uses proposed are a mix of single-family, townhomes, multifamily dwellings with that area that's being rezoned to the northeast, and then neighborhood commercial just to the south along Huntington. The proposal, they're also proposing to use the current Pinnacle Prairie general design guidelines for any new development to make it look like a cohesive development over time. So in their design guidelines, they have building design standards, landscaping standards, signage, and they're going for a prairie-style aesthetic. That's what the developer has decided to focus on for this area. As we discussed previously with the last concept, they are showing and refining that townhome area, with a focus on most of these on alley-loaded types, and those are also featured in their design guidelines. The neighborhood commercial is to the east. There's a small neighborhood commercial area that's right up against Cedar Heights Drive. That it's important to have street access and trail connections to ensure that the neighborhood residents have easy access to this area. With this new concept, it's even more accessible than it was shown in the previous concept with that extension of Prairie View Drive. And you can see here that it really does provide a nice east-west connection. This is a zoom-in view of the area that's being proposed for rezoning to mixed use. It's primarily then multifamily development. On the west side, it would be the extension and it would end in a cul-de-sac. That small area there on the west of the Green Creek floodplain there would be allowed to be then part of that single-family street. The multifamily area has approximately 12 units per acre, but that once that is brought in for more site plan review, will determine exactly how many units can fit on that site. It's shown as clustered outside the floodplain. The buildings are oriented toward the street with parking located behind, under, or to the sides of the building and screened with landscaping. Each building, you can see here in this concept, has good access to the open space and amenities into the neighborhood trails. So staff finds this to be a very attractive concept plan for the multifamily. Back to the street network, a lot of good aspects to what they're proposing here. There's good public access to the trail network, to the 3.5-acre park that's proposed, which fronts on Prairie View Road. The streets are laid out in an attractive curvilinear yet connected pattern. Staff would note that there is one block in the center that probably needs to be broken up with a short neighborhood street connection, but that can be taken care of at the preliminary plat stage. The open space is well distributed throughout the neighborhood and coincides with the floodplain and stormwater management, which is a regional design. Once again about that east-west street connection, will connect to Huntington Road. Then at that intersection, the city is upgrading Cedar Heights Drive, making improvements to that, and will be making improvements to create a roundabout at that, or allow for a roundabout to be created in the future at that intersection. So it'll be designed to be able to be retrofitted for a roundabout. However, if this commercial area, it is close to that floodplain, if for some reason that commercial area cannot be developed due to some floodplain issues, then the developer has agreed that an alternative route for that east-west route would be to go to extend Prairie View Road to the along the southern edge of that multifamily area. So if that were to occur, there would be needed some adjustments to that multifamily concept so that there's room for the road along the southern edge of the multifamily. So some of that concept would need to shift accordingly. So those details would need to be worked out then through the development agreement prior to council consideration, what that trigger would be if it was determined that the commercial was not going to be developed. One of the things we always look at when you're being asked to rezone property is whether it has good access to public services. And as you can see, the public services are available to this area, so easy to extend those to new development. With stormwater management, you can see here there is extensive floodplain and it extends through the neighborhood. So a regional stormwater management system really works well here, so that's what's proposed for that drainage. We did note, and we talked about this with the previous plan, that new lots would not be allowed to be platted with more than 25% of the lot area in the floodplain. And that was something, the detail we'd have to work out during platting. So there may be some slight adjustments to the street and lots shown in the concept plan to meet those regulations. The open space parks and trails that are shown are really quite extensive in this proposal. The mixed-use district does require 10% of the land area to remain as open space. The open space and trails coincide then with the floodplain here. The trails extend from the west to the 3.5-acre park and then across the creek to provide that connection to the multifamily area and to the commercial area. According to the previous agreement, 2% of the open space must be developed as parkland. And so those numbers had to be adjusted for this new area. This all will be, of course, the details will be addressed in that development agreement. Just a few technical comments. The preliminary and final plat will be required prior to any land sales within the planned area. We just note that piecemeal planting is not really in the interest of the owner or the community, particularly with so much of the infrastructure is shared and there's a regional sharing of stormwater facilities. It really helps to determine how those benefits and costs should be shared across all the lots in the development. The previous issues that were, if you may recall, some of you may recall, there were a couple issues that hadn't been taken care of in the 2015 agreement. Those now have been resolved, and so I just did want to let you know that. The improvements to Goldenrod Street stub will be completed this next year, and funds have been paid into escrow for the developer's proportional share of the improvements at the roundabout at Prairie View Road and Prairie Parkway. The city will complete that project according to the CIP schedule. A new developmental procedures agreement will need to be drafted and signed before setting a public hearing at City Council for this requested rezoning. With that, I would note that the Community Development Department recommends an initial discussion tonight of the proposed rezoning and answer any questions you might have. If you have things you would like us to bring more information to you before the hearing, but then to set a public hearing for the April 14th meeting.
Thank you, Karen. Does anyone on the commission have questions for staff?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Leanne.
Why don't we know now if commercial is allowed in that spot or not? What would change that?
So the floodplain maps right now are under, we have a current floodplain map that's current, that we have to, is regulatory. That area is still shown as developable for commercial. So if that area is platted prior to the new preliminary floodplain maps going into effect, likely next year, but that's the FEMA that's going to be adopting the new firm maps. If it's platted prior to that, there shouldn't be a problem. If it takes longer than that, those new floodplain maps may create some problems.
Thank you.
Good question. Any other questions for staff by the commission? All right, is there any applicants that would like to speak to the item? Online or live? All right, seeing, we have one. Name and address, please.
Eric Johnson, Beecher Law Firm, Waterloo, Iowa. I thought Carrie Hansen was going to address this online. Is she not?
She hasn't joined us. I don't see that.
Would you like to address it, Eric?
Well, no, I was the boots on the ground to answer questions in case they had technical difficulties, and so.
Well, you're on.
Yeah.
So.
Certainly, if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. But Carrie Hansen and Mike Shoppy from Shoppy Design have been really leading this, and we're before you in the fall, and I've only been involved trying to help with the development procedures agreement, getting that updated, and some other local things that they needed. But to the extent I can, I'll answer questions. But the only reason I came up when we talked this morning, she was going to take the lead of presenting anything that needed to be presented, and Karen did a nice job. So really, this was something that came before you before. It failed on a 4-4 split, with the real issue being that east-west connection that's been provided, so we hope that, we get your blessing to move forward.
Thank you, Eric. Any questions for the applicant? You got off the hook. All right, with that, I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this item?
Seeing none in Zoom.
All right, we're going to bring it back to the commission for discussion. Again, as a reminder, this item is for discussion tonight, and a motion to set the public hearing for April 14th. Any discussion?
Aaron, has, with the new east-west connection, does that meet what the fire and the emergency vehicles were asking for?
Yes, that should be adequate to provide that good street connection over to the arterial street. The access then to the multifamily area, will have to work out how that works when they bring in a site plan for that.
Okay, thank you.
I think the plan looks really good, and it addressed the one major issue, as you mentioned, with the connection to the to the east, and I think they've done that very nicely. And I would hope that commercial area doesn't get lost there down with the flood maps being redone, because I think that works out really nicely. So everything I see on there is very positive. So,
Any other comments?
I make a motion to set the public hearing.
We have a motion, second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is it okay I do a voice vote on this, Karen?
Yes, I think that's fine.
All those in favor?
aye.
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 Opposed? Same sign? All right, that we'll set the public hearing for April 14th on that item. The next item on our new business is the Imagine College Hill Vision Plan public hearing. Who's talking today?
I'm going to be talking today, thank you. My name is Michelle Peasley, and after our meeting on the 10th in March, we had talked about the public comments, and the direction from the commission was to gather a response, and we did that, and it was provided into the packet for today's meeting. I'm going to go over an overview of that memo, and there will be some details be left out, but we're going to go on a broad overview of those our responses. So moving to the next slide. One of the questions that the city received was what kind of outreach the city did for College Hill Vision Plan. And from the start, before the kickoff had started, the city had provided mailers to every address within the area, College Hill area, as well as provided mailers to the people that within 300 feet of College Hill study area. The postcards were sent to business owners, inviting them to participate and ask if they would be willing to provide flyers or tabletops in their business or post flyers. The city also worked on providing press releases to social media and as on the city cable channel. And staff held interviews on local radio stations and TV programs. As every Currents magazine within the past year had provided updates within the magazine that is sent to everyone in the district, provided updates of what was going on in College Hill for everyone that wanted to be involved, could be involved. And the city also partnered with the College Hill Partnership Board, providing opportunities for them to comment, keeping them updated on the process. And the city worked with the executive director of the partnership and with the city's communication specialist, and they held interviews and also provided FaceTime lives, working together to get the word out of what was going on with College Hill. The College Hill Partnership also went above and beyond and added the updates on their blog and sent emails to their membership list of each phase that was going on. The city also posted posters at the public buildings of the library, community center, City Hall, College Hill businesses, and the Hearst Center. The meetings were even advertised on the recreational center and visitor center reader boards. The city partnered with the University of Northern Iowa and interviewed a number of University of Iowa, Northern Iowa officials during the kickoff and during the charrette process. They were willing to coordinate with our student outreach and help us with that. And they also helped conduct an online student survey. The city also updated our city website with all the updates of the process, as well as our cedarfalls.com. And the city website provided an opportunity for people could sign up for updates as we were moving forward as well.
Move the slides on the,
Oh, thank you.
we have two computers going here, so.
And then finally, oh, yes. So one of the issues that were brought up was equality in the planning efforts. And the staff sat down together with the consultants and looked at how we were going to look at reviewing the plan and seeing if we were being fair, and also if there's areas of less equality, discouraging diversity, or especially harming minority populations. And in that review, we looked at the plan and looked at adding opportunities for a wider range of housing types. The plan also focuses on leveling the playing field between housing for college students, which are short-term renters, versus long-term renters and owner households seeking affordable housing opportunities within the College Hill neighborhoods. The plan looked at the walkable Main Street areas like College Hill Business District to provide opportunities for locally grown businesses at a scale that is more affordable for women and minority owner businesses to start up. And staff also in the staff report, we listed those recommendations on how to improve the language in the plan and enhance language, and we'll be talking about that later on in the presentation. But first, I would like to hand off to Mary Madeline, our consultant with Madeline Farrell, and she's going to address questions about parking and what is a vision plan versus a regulatory plan. Mary, are you there?
I am here. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for letting me address you one more time. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
So I would like to give a little background. We had a lot of public comment and feedback and questions at the last session where we talked about the College Hill Vision Plan. So one really important point is I think everybody needs to remember that a vision plan is a policy document. It's not regulatory. Some questions were raised about the new zoning, and all of this effort is coming before we start working on zoning. Typically, when you think about a vision plan, it's aspirational. Which direction would the city like to go? And then ultimately the zoning changes you work on specifically to implement the vision plan. One thing that we heard really clearly during the College Hill visioning effort was that there's a strong desire for revitalization and redevelopment, especially in the business district, the mixed use area along College. When you think about that, there's a couple of different things to keep in mind. You are definitely dependent on private reinvestment to make that redevelopment happen. In addition, there are things that the city can do, both from establishing new public policies, changing regulations such as the zoning, as well as there may be some additional public investment, whether that be in public spaces or sidewalks or stormwater, et cetera. So all of those pieces come into play when you think about moving forward and implementing the plan. One of the things that you really want to do if you're thinking about redevelopment and revitalization is how do you set the table for the private sector? How do you make it improve their ability to really implement the plan from their reinvestment? So one of the things is to give them certainty or clarity so everybody understands what the vision for the area is. Another way is to remove any barriers that may be there unintentionally that slow down redevelopment. And then the next thing is really how can you unlock that redevelopment potential? So, Michelle, next. In this plan, I had it up, I didn't mention it, on page 21, I want to just touch on, in the plan, we really highlighted 4 specific things related to parking. These are recommendations. We didn't come at them lightly, but they really built on the visioning, the analysis, the input that we had. So the first one was we did recommend that as this moves forward, the city should take a look at the current parking requirements and consider updating them as part of the zoning update. We called it right-sizing the standards. That can be done in several different ways. There are ratios, there are requirements for parking to be on site. So there are different tools that come into play when we move forward to revise the current standards, but we think that's really important to unlock the potential, and I will touch on that in a little more depth. Another thing that we heard very loud and clear was there's a need to coordinate better with UNI when it comes to parking, and the parking study highlighted this as well. Currently, the city has different processes, different policies, and charges different rates. UNI has a different set of standards. Oftentimes, they really appear to be working at cross purposes. In an area like this that is so integrated with the university, having a consistent way to address parking is really important. And I'll touch on that a little bit more. Third, there were questions about what, we had not redone the parking study. We did not feel there was any reason for us to redo the parking study. It's a pretty new study. It is, just completed about a year ago. We saw much the same thing that the parking study identified, so we thought it really needs to be just continue to implement that. One high-level thing that people need to understand if you haven't read the parking study is that it focuses on the public parking. It focuses on the parking that the city provides, whether that's in city lots or on street. It does not talk about a strategy for the private parking. So that's really something that the vision plan needs to sort of bridge over that. And then the last thing that we recommended as this plan is implemented, as you move forward, if you have revised the parking standards and there needs to be any tweaks or adjustments, it should not be set in concrete. There may need to be multiple tools used. In the opening of this section on page 21, we said this is not an either or, you do X or you do Y. Most likely you're going to need to do multiple things to really manage the parking to unlock the redevelopment potential. So what do we mean about that? Next slide. One of the things in the parking study that you see on this page, near the bottom, underlined, is specifically what's happening on College Hill. I think if you click that, it should pop up. The parking study found 2 really important things right now. On the Hill, the parking that the city provides for the general public is less expensive than what the university provides. So that's simple economics. It's a bit euphemistic that the city is less expensive because in many places it's not just less expensive. The city is providing free parking on the city streets for a lot of the study area for folks who are either students or work at the university. So one, people are going to opt to park there if it's free versus paying. That's human nature. I think we can all understand that. The second part is this area next to our study area, the heart of the business district, is actually closer to many of the classroom buildings and the activity centers during the weekdays that the university needs. And so we heard this absolutely from students that we talked with that reiterated this. Students who lived on the southwest corner off campus in apartments or rental houses told us that rather than walking from where they lived, rather than buying a commuter permit for the spaces that are up by the dome, they park in the neighborhoods east of College because they can park there for free. It's closer to their classes. They take the risk of getting tickets because they've done the math that they could get like 5 or 6 tickets a semester, and it would still be less expensive than buying a campus pass, and they're closer to the campus. So this area is within about a 5-minute walk of campus, and the commuter lot is about a 10 to 15-minute walk. So all of this tells us, you know, even if there's not a problem right now, the city of Cedar Falls is providing parking for a lot of folks for either minimal fee or free. The parking study has started being implemented. The fees on the different lots are now being charged. I think that's now just been going for about 9 months. So I think probably the city may be ready to take a look and see, you know, how has that impacted what's happening? Is the parking more available, less available? A big question going forward is who should get to park on the city streets and how much should they pay to do that? I think we all feel our study and the parking study and the vision plan for the business district, it's really important to have short-term parking available for people who frequent those businesses. But beyond that, should neighborhood residents be able to park on the street? Should students be able to park on the street? Should visitors to campus be able to park on the street? How long should they be able to park there? That's sort of a longer-term question. But that's just really important to understand. We looked very closely at this parking study and then also had to think about how does this affect redevelopment, revitalization, again, which is the priority for this vision plan. Next slide. In the back of the plan, and this was referenced at the last meeting, there is a page that discusses parking ratios. It's page 89. I'm not going to read this, but there are a couple of things that we wanted to highlight. This plan is full of prototypical development scenarios, sort of what if someone redeveloped in this way, and people have generally said they liked the ideas that we presented. Well, in looking at our parking numbers, our experience with development, our market economists looking at redevelopment costs, we started trying to factor all this in. I wanted everyone to realize, if they didn't know, the illustrations that we've provided are not just cartoons. Yes, they're not real projects in that we don't have a client saying, I want to build this exact building. But this text will explain when we do those type of drawings, we look at real building footprints. We look at the actual property size, the parcel. So how big is the parcel? If you do a standard apartment building that has what we call a double loaded corridor, you know, it needs to be about 65 feet wide so that you can have rooms on both sides of a central hallway. We look at average apartment sizes. For making math easy, this chart works with 1,000 square feet for a 2-bedroom apartment. So the idea is these are not just made up. We also look at how big is a parking space. If a parcel is only so big and you have a building that's this size, how much parking can you fit on there? Depending on how much space you have and whether or not you have an alley, you also have to figure out circulation for parking. So it's not just a number of square feet for the parking spaces. You have to figure out, do you have to have drive aisles, turning radius for people to be able to get in and out of spaces. So those drawings are not just imaginary, wow, wouldn't this be cool? We sat there and worked out all of those numbers, and then what if the building is 2 stories? What if the building is 3 stories? What if the building is 4 stories? Because all of those things impact the cost of development, the need for parking, et cetera. So next slide. So in this example, this was along College Street. If you know Bonnie's Liquor Store, that's the building in the middle of the parking lot at 22nd Street in College. And then there's some houses that are currently rental. So we explored the idea of that block, those parcels along College, the east side of College, redeveloping. And here you see the illustration with them being 4 stories, commercial retail space on the ground floor, apartments on the upper story. So this was a real example. And then if you look at the back side, you can see the curb cut for a parking lot on the back side of the building. But the building doesn't go right back to the houses behind it. You have some space there so you don't overshadow those backyards. But this is a real theoretical building footprint, that the kind of space you would need. We looked at the actual property lines, et cetera. It's not just sort of imaginary. In this scenario, we also included that the back half of the buildings at the ground level could have a row of parking. So we were calculating how much parking could we fit on this site. Next. So, right there. This again is a couple of different parcels that are between 22nd and 23rd along Myrner, and then going back towards College, but not all the way to College. We explored similarly several different scenarios. The first one that shows redevelopment, which is the prototype 1, that's more of a townhouse configuration. Because there is a rear drive or an alley, townhouses, you could pull right off the alley and park and have spaces, so you can accommodate a certain amount of parking that way. The next one down, we looked at bigger buildings, and you could have a small parking lot, but similarly, you would probably need to have some surface level parking on the underground side, the ground floor back of these buildings. And then the third scenario is showing all of the redevelopment happening at once. Again, we looked at how big are these buildings, how much parking would you need? How much could you accommodate with a building at this size? We had some people who said, why don't we make these buildings taller? This is closer to where the tall dormitories are. And one of the things we looked at, if you go taller, you can't get any more parking on at the surface level. So that's a really important point, is we were always trying to figure out how much can you fit on the surface? Because some people will say, build a structure, go underground. That could definitely be done engineering design-wise. That adds an incredible cost to the cost of construction and development. So if you're really trying to get revitalization and you're thinking this is going to be students and you're wanting it to be affordable to students, the idea that a private developer is going to either build underground or a private above-ground structure is not very realistic. So this is how we worked through coming up with the numbers. Now I'm going to look a little more closely at the chart, the next slide again. So this table really goes back and looks at those prototypical sites I just showed you. Based on and in general, people were very positive, enthusiastic about those prototypical developments, both during the charrette process and in the online survey. People said, yes, they like that idea, they like mixed use, they like that scale of buildings, they didn't think they were too tall, etc. So as we worked through the vision plan, we came back to develop and to do this table so people could see. Well, we said, if you really want to see this type of redevelopment and revitalization, you're going to need to think differently about parking. And there's several different ways to do that. So the footprints of the building that you saw cover a certain amount of the site. We went through, and each one of the sites in the yellow shows, as we drew those prototypical projects, this is the number of parking spaces that we could fit on the site, along with the circulation, without going multi-story, without going underground, without building a deck. How many parking spaces could you fit? That's in the yellow. The site tells you which building you're looking at. The next column, using the average numbers that we said, 1,000 square feet, it gives you a 2-bedroom apartment and accommodates the hallways in the building, etc. we looked at if the buildings were 3 stories with ground floor commercial or 4 stories with ground floor commercial. So that's what those numbers are in the units / bedrooms. The third column is currently the rate for College Hill is 1 parking space per bedroom on site. So as we drew the vision plan and the prototypical sites, if you wanted something to the scale and character of what we drew, only one of those projects could be built under the current standards. So as you go down and you see the addresses in 3 stories versus 4 stories, the development that we illustrated at 22nd and Murner, if it only went up to 3 stories, they could meet the current parking requirements. So if you want somebody to redevelop, as we heard you people did, if they can't meet the current standards, there's no incentive for them to do anything. Most all of those properties right now, they're occupied, they're getting rent, they're full. So there's just no financial incentive for them to redevelop. I'm not saying they have to maximize their profit. I'm saying there's just no if they're getting rents right now, they have no motivation to do anything. It doesn't matter how much the city or the neighbors or anybody says we want to see redevelopment, we want to see revitalization. The next column is looking at if the on-site ratio were 0.75. And I'm saying on-site because we said think differently about parking. We're not saying absolutely this is what the ratio needs to be. You might still have a higher ratio, but you might permit a landlord to provide the parking in another location. Currently, they cannot do that. The parking is supposed to be on-site. So if you were to lower the on-site ratio to 0.75 per bedroom, then you start seeing, well, going to 3 stories, then some of these projects could be built at that ratio. If you were to lower it as far as 0.5, which would really kind of go back to the older standard of 1 bedroom per unit, basically all of these could be redeveloped in the prototypical way that we illustrated if the owners or developers chose to do it. Always circling back to this is a vision plan. This is not the city requiring any of the property owners to do any of this, but this is trying to figure out if we want to see revitalization, redevelopment, we need to think differently about parking if we want to unlock that redevelopment potential. The very bottom row I haven't touched on yet. It's a shorthand, it's not really a technical name, but the idea of a parking sink. Are there locations on Capitol Hill where someone might be able to build a parking lot that could accommodate some of this off-site parking? Because we know right now the students do not want to walk a half a mile to park next to the dome. We've heard that anecdotally. I think we've witnessed it. I'm not sure what I just said. Jeff said I used the wrong word. College Hill, I'm not sure what I just said. Anyway, the parking sink idea is, is there a place for parking on the hill that would save people from having to put it on their own site? So one of the scenarios that we looked at is this way that you could accommodate 166 additional surface parking spaces in the College Hill study area. So next slide. I'm not going to read through all of this, but similar to the project you just saw, this area has a lot of floodplain in it. Some of it is vacant lots now. Some of it has houses on it now. Moving forward, a large area is not redevelopable for residential because of floodplains, or it would be really, really expensive to put residential there because you would have to elevate all of the buildings significantly. So we explored the idea if you could put a green parking lot that actually could be designed to help with stormwater. There is some area on, now of course I'm forgetting, I think it's 20th Street, potentially where you could do something like this. I do want to highlight There may be other locations, but you would not want to put them directly on College, again, because this is a big picture vision plan. This isn't just about parking. The goal here is not to get as much parking as possible. It's to revitalize the area. You would not want to do something like this along College, because one of the other really important goals we had is to reconnect the upper and lower hill. And one of the disconnects today is the number of surface parking lots along College that make it a really not too nice place to walk, the number of curb cuts, et cetera. So there may be other locations that you could provide surface parking, do it nicely designed, make sure it's green, make sure it handles stormwater, but it can help unlock that redevelopment potential if the city decides we can allow off-site parking on College Hill. So that's what the idea of the parking sink is. Next. There was also, I think, some question. We used the term, it's colloquial, the idea of a project not penciling out. There are several factors that come into play. I've already touched on one of those, which is the idea if someone has to go to structured parking to meet their parking requirements on their site, you are adding an incredible expense. So that makes it more difficult for them to get a return on investment. Again, I'm not saying maximum profit possible. I'm saying that they could even break even. Our economists looked at all the numbers and talked to several different people, both landlords and developers, and what the sort of going rate is in your area, plus she's worked all over the country. There are several different things that come into play. If a landlord has a rental property that's full and they have to demolish that property, even if they own it outright, and then they're not going to be getting any rent for as long as they're redeveloping, then most likely, even if they already own the land, they're probably going to have to take out a mortgage, a loan to do the construction, et cetera. Typically, they need to be able to come back with about 3 to 4 times as many units as they currently have on the lot for redevelopment to make sense. So if you add on there the cost of parking, you really start making it where it won't pencil out. That is not the same if someone has an existing building. Existing building is making revenue, they already have their parking, et cetera. So that's the idea. There are a lot of different things that come into play. It's not an absolute science, but there are things consistently. The cost of development, the cost of new development is not the same as just a house being converted into apartments or something along those lines. So that's big picture. I don't want to bore everybody and go too far into all of these details. I just wanted people to have a better understanding. This vision plan does not say what a new ratio should be. That's a regulation. And we will get to revisit that and discuss and hear from lots of people about what the appropriate parking should be on College Hill. But I also want to kind of circle back to Michelle's opening comments. And the other piece that we heard last time was the questions and concerns about social equity and had we reached out enough, et cetera. Well, one of the really significant costs in housing is parking. So yes, we understand students have cars. We know from students we met, we know from our web survey, we know from what the universities told us, every student does not have a car. But if you're requiring every bedroom of every apartment to provide a parking space, you don't know if they're going to be students or if it's going to be a young couple with 2 kids. But suddenly, if you're a young couple with 2 kids or a single mom with 3 kids and you rent a 3-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom apartment, and you're saying you have to have parking spaces for 4 people, you're suddenly adding a significant cost to the rent. So that's really important to keep in mind. Another thing I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of different tools and who gets to park for free and who pays, for the city lots or the city parking on street. In your memo, you also last time asked, what do they do in Iowa City? And one of the things, their ratios right next to campus are considerably lower than anything we've even shown here, but they simultaneously require paying on the streets. They're not providing free spaces on the streets. So they used meters. That's one thing to keep in mind. As I said, it's not going to be do X or Y. There may be a need to do a combination of things. If you want to have spaces close to campus so students who don't have cars can get an affordable unit, they can walk, they can ride their bike, etc. But if students with cars want to be right there, where do they put their cars? Should the city be providing long-term storage on the streets for students with cars? That's a big policy question to think through. There's also a really important thing to keep in mind is at what point do you let the market control? I believe in Iowa City, they made the decision that, if a student has a car and having a place to park their car off street in a lot or in a garage, etc., they will pick where they're going to live based on the fact that they have to have somewhere to put their car. And it shouldn't necessarily be up to the city to provide that space on the city street, etc. So in some ways, the market will play a role in this. If you provide parking everywhere for every bedroom, you will be doing what's known as induced demand. You make it really easy for people who have a car, who could live other places, to take sort of the prime locations right next to campus with a parking space, and then you kind of lose that intensity of students that can help you get more businesses, et cetera. So the vision plan had to look at a lot more than parking, but we didn't ignore parking. I think I may have said too much about parking, but hopefully that gives you quite a bit of background, and I'm happy to answer questions, but I think we're going to circle back. I think Michelle is going to talk about proposed some text changes.
Correct. Thank you, Mary. So we do have proposed changes. Again, this is not the complete list. The complete list is in the memo that was provided for this meeting, but a few of them I wanted to highlight. And the first one on page 3 that we would want to talk about is the stabilizing of the surrounding neighborhoods. We mentioned earlier that the college students are short-term renters, and they do change the effect of the neighborhood. And stabilizing it would make it for more opportunities for long-term renters to be there, as well as homeowners. And then the next one, we were looking at talking about adding that extra, I need to forward too, adding that extra missing middle that were left out on this, looking at page 4 in the introduction of the summary, executive summary of the report. And that will the missing middle will also provide different variety of housing options and rental options that could also create more walkable neighborhoods in this area. So the second slide, or third slide here, there's 2 recommendations on this slide. And page 17, again, we're talking about the how students can outbid the long-term renters because there's 3 or 4 students, and they can pool their resources together versus one family having 1 or 2 incomes. And then on page 30, we just wanted to again point out the rental units being affordable and attractive to the diversity of households. So our last, I think it's our last, the next slide on page, changing on page 35, really having regulations, recommending policies to level the playing field, that we can create a better balance between the student renters, other renters, and the occupied homeowners. And then the last, on page 36, we're also recommending that that missing middle will provide a range of prices and attractable housing options for different households. And with that, with all the recommendations that are in the staff report that you received, staff is recommending Approval of the Imagine College Hill Vision Plan, subject to any other recommendations by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And staff is available for any questions.
Thank you, Michelle and Mary, for that good overview. I think we're going to open it for public comment at this time. Is there anyone online?
I do have Becky Hop-Baker.
Becky, if you could give your name and address.
Iowa Street, so I'm 2 blocks from the Hill. I also I serve on the College Hill Partnership Board for many years, and sorry, my dog is barking. While I want to support most of the broad recommendations of the College Hill Visionary plan, I also do want to put in a comment for preserving the neighborhood areas. So I live 3 blocks from the Hill, and I totally support more development that would bring a greater diversity of business to the Hill. And I mean, part of why I moved here and live here is I value the diversity. I love that I live near students, near retired teachers and faculty, and many different types of people. And that is what is best about the Hill neighborhood. But I want to make sure that owner-occupied, commitment to this neighborhood in terms of, putting in investment and making this neighborhood work, that is also enshrined. And, I agree with all the parking recommendations that the board has recommended. And as a instructor at UNI, I know that many of my students don't have driver's license. They don't drive. That is the new millennial generation. But I do want to make sure that in the process we don't lose the diversity of owner-occupied historic neighborhoods in this area, especially in the homes surrounding Searley Park. And revitalizing Searley Park, revitalizing this community for children and families. I'm done.
Thank you, Becky. Is there anyone else online?
Yeah, we have Christopher Martin.
Chris, name and address.
Yeah, hi, my name is Chris Martin. I live at 421 West Searley in College Hill in Cedar Falls. I live and work on the Hill. I'm also a landlord, not a big one, just one rental property, but I thought that would be useful for you to know. I just had 4 quick points. I'm actually the president of the College Hill Partnership, the same organization that Becky is on the board of, and have been with the organization since its inception in 2009. And we're really excited about this vision plan for College Hill. So just 4 quick points. We think it encourages students to live close to campus, where they have a better opportunity of being successful. And the university provides data that actually talks about that. Students who live closer are more successful. The plan also encourages stabilization of the neighborhoods. Mary talked a bit about that, as did Becky, by allowing single homes to stay as single-family homes, as rentals for families are owner-occupied. And so that actually provides more diversity for families. Otherwise, with more conversions, housing becomes overpriced rental properties, and we wanted to avoid that. Thirdly, this plan encourages resilience by encouraging multiple modes of transportation to be a focus instead of focusing solely on car traffic. So part of our vision for what the Hill should be would be more people walking, more people taking bikes. It would be healthier, but also make for a better type of neighborhood. And then finally, we've talked for years to nearly all College Hill businesses, and they want nearly all College Hill businesses want more customers in the neighborhood. We need more density. I know there's a story of one business on College Hill that was upset about parking and moved away, but that's really an outlier. The vast majority of the businesses want more people here who are within walking and biking distance of their businesses. That makes for a more sustainable business district with a built-in base of students and older residents who can walk to the businesses. So density, not more parking lots and structures, are really what College Hill needs. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. That's everyone online. Is there anyone in the room? Name and address, please.
My name is Catherine Sogard. I live at 330 Columbia Circle in Waterloo, and Chris stole a lot of my thunder. He had a lot of the same points that I had, but I wanted to reiterate that the College Hill Partnership's mission really states, this vision really fits the mission that the partnership has had since its inception in 2009, when the Neighborhood Association and the Business Association merged. And I think the idea of the merger was to bring, we've had these continuing conversations over a long amount of time, and they've been really similar. Parking, rentals, code enforcement, all of that has been encompassed in the conversations we had in this visioning. And one of the reasons for the merger was to put all those people at the table. So we've just been really thankful in this process because it's allowed people to have a voice in what they would like to see and some of the things we've been talking about for years. So the scope of the partnership's mission is to promote healthy neighborhoods, neighborhood businesses, housing enhancement, strengthening collaboration and pride, developing public and private partnerships, and serving as an advocate for addressing area concerns. And the first line in our mission is actually, we're a nonprofit organization that serves as a leader in revitalization and promotion of College Hill. So a lot of this vision aligns exactly with the mission that the partnership has agreed on since its inception in 2009. So like Chris highlighted, we believe that this vision really focuses on some of the key areas, like making sure to stabilize the outer neighborhoods as you go out from campus on College Hill, making sure that you kind of increase density, allowing more students to live closer to campus for their success. I think sometimes what people forget, and that I like to address, being a part of the College Hill Partnership has really reminded me how much Cedar Falls depends on UNI, but UNI depends on Cedar Falls. So we kind of have to work as a cohesive team to make sure that we're benefiting each other. We're providing services to those students that they can use to be successful. And hopefully they'll come here and then they'll stay here for a long amount of time. And also, like Chris said, encouraging resilience and making sure that our area is walkable and thriving. One thing I did want to point out, because I know there's been conversations elsewhere online and all over, that I did want to take some time to thank everyone who did participate in the many activities, conversations, workshops that were publicly held by the city and facilitated by the consultants of Farrell Madden. Our organization has been grateful to participate in helping the city promote these events by attending news and radio and social media interviews, talking about the public opportunities to contribute to the plan. We've worked in partnership with city staff to distribute printed materials to the businesses and place publicly around College Hill. We've also used our platform on social media, our email list, our blog, to spread the word about the process. We are thankful for community input in this project throughout the process, and we continue to encourage all members of the community and those who love College Hill to actively participate in the events and the public forum. I was also able to have a conversation with our liaison from UNI that serves on our board, Andrew Morse, and he wanted me to pass along some information to you from the university. The people who the city worked with the consultants at UNI, he told me that I could convey this, that they generally support the concept and notably the neighborhood aesthetic, a vibrant business atmosphere, and they're supportive of the progress. He also said that this wide depth and breadth of this visioning is going to be vital for the future of the university. So that's, I think, something definitely to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Other public? Name and address, please.
Ishan Vajpayee, 3831 Convair Lane. I hope you'll indulge me wearing two hats because this idea just came to me. First hat, kind of speaking from my heart a little bit, is that in terms of the diversity issue, Cedar Falls and Section 8 has always had like a pretty bad relationship, or that's probably too mean or broad of a concept to say, but the waiting list is always so huge. There's such a huge lack of Section 8 supply in Cedar Falls, and I mean, the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of Section 8 diversity, people and, BIPOC or whatever, and so especially now that our legislature, and I'm not judging, whatever, is going to make it legal to openly discriminate against Section 8 housing applicants, it would be nice that maybe you send along a message to City Council that that might be a priority for some redevelopment on the Hill. Because, like I said in my last presentation, the last building that was built with no parking didn't bring the rent down. It's the most expensive building on the Hill. So that's sort of my heart hat. And I'm a landlord in Waterloo, and I have a Section 8 tenant, and I know they get a bad rap, but she's great. And I just think that that would really help Cedar Falls' image a little bit and diversify the Hill. Okay, lawyer hat. I represent a group called Concerned Citizens for College Hill. And you got the information and everything. I'm going to try and keep this oral presentation sort of fresh and address some of the things said by the consultant, which, I agree with like 90% of what she said. Here's one thing I disagree with, or I want to point out. She pointed out on the parking ratios chart that only one of their prototypical projects could be built under the current parking law. Okay, but the margin isn't that far off. So she kind of posed the question, how are they going to build under the current parking law? Well, for the first building, all they have to do is cut 5 beds. For the second, all they have to do is cut 4 beds. For the last, all they have to do is cut 4 beds. So it's true that the current parking rules would prevent that specific building with that specific amount of bedrooms to be built, but not a building that looks exactly like it, just with maybe a couple fewer bedrooms. Okay, that's it. And it's kind of this difference of, are we going to build what we want with as many bedrooms as we want, and then look at the parking? Or are we going to build a building to suit the actual parking demand? And that's where I want to turn to the parking study. And she mentioned that it talked about public parking only. I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouth, but I want to clarify that. There was a whole section on the parking analysis of a proposed development, 2119 College, and it's not being proposed now or anything, but it's a great, prototype to look at these ratios. And again, their math doesn't work under the current code if you want to build a specific building. Okay, fine. But let's look at what the Institute of Transportation Engineers and the Urban Land Institute said about observed parking demand. Observed demand through parking counts and traffic counts and inventory counts just in May of 2019. It said that the ULI projected parking demand for a 30-bedroom, a 30-unit building here. So we got 23 bedrooms, then we got 8. is 40 spots. So you're gonna have, you're gonna have 7 spots here, 11 here. So it's a little less than 1-to-1, but then it also talks about the commercial demand of being 26 spots. So I think just look at these ratios and look at what the parking study says. Okay, and that was at that time. Those traffic counts and all the sentiment you see in the survey that we did, my group did, and the parking study did, I don't think anyone is going to be able to look at that survey and in good faith say that most people think there's plenty of parking on the hill. Every single question is predominantly and sometimes overwhelmingly of the sentiment, these are the people that actually live there, that there is not enough parking, or it's pretty tight as it is. And the point I'm making there is that it's pretty tight as it is, and that's under the old parking law. That's under the law because nothing's really been built of substance since the 1-to-1 took place. Everything of substance up there that's large and takes up, has a lot of bedrooms was built under 2 spots for a 1-bedroom, 3 for a 3, 4 for a 4, plus visitor parking. So that's what my little chart here is about, is that everyone who thinks there's not enough parking or that parking is pretty tight, that's under this scenario. Okay? Then there's a reduction of 40% required parking down to 1-to-1. Okay? So we don't know what the parking's going to turn out like under 1-to-1. We have no idea how much tighter it's going to get. We have no idea how much worse it's going to get for people who feel that it's bad or already tight, because nothing has been built here. That building that needed that quick decision, that needed the vote to reduce to 40% and couldn't wait for the parking study, they never built it. And I suspect it might be because they were trying to get another bite at the apple to get them reduced even further. So we don't even, like I said, we don't know the impact of 1-to-1. And now, I'm sorry, it is a prototype. But everyone on this panel knows or should know that when you pass a visioning plan to City Council without additional comment, they are going to take a look at that vision plan, vote for it maybe, you're going to get it kicked back here for zoning, and then 9 months from now you're going to be told, remember when you voted for this vision plan? You really liked this vision plan. And City Council voted for this vision plan, and they really liked this vision plan. And this vision plan says we should do 0.5 parking spots per bedroom. So that's the importance of, even though it's a prototype, even though it's a draft, even though it's visioning versus regulation, that you make your opinions known now to council. In fact, I think it was Councilman Dara who requested that your work sessions be recorded now, because he wants to know, hey, planning and zoning spends a lot of time on these building plans. They probably spend more time on it than us, considering the ramifications of these site plans and these zoning things. I'd like to know kind of what their rationale was, what's going through their mind, so that I can make a better decision at council. And so, I'm gonna skip to the chase here a little bit, but the parking study, based on 1-to-1, said that with that 2119 College, you're possibly still going to have 15 spots, 15 cars spilling out into the street. And if you cut it down to 0.5, you might have 30 cars spilling out onto the street. And you actually need 26 parking spots for the commercial, but we're not going to park that. So just like I said at the last time, you can't underpark both. You can't underpark the commercial and the residential. And don't let yourself be fooled into thinking that, oh God, if we don't lower the parking ratios, we can't have this building. It's a false choice. You can't have that exact building in the chart, but you can have a revitalized College Hill with the current parking. And you want to talk about certainty for developers? What kind of certainty is this? Someone throws a fit about a building they want to build and gets the parking reduced by 40%, doesn't build it, and now 2 years later you're back and you want to change it again? 2 years. So what if someone had built in that interim period? Do they get to, under 1-to-1, do they get to like get their parking spots rebated from the city? What if someone builds tomorrow? Are they going to get parking spots rebated? What about all the people that built under the old law for years and years and years and years and years? They're not going bankrupt. So I just want us, I'd like that with your vote, if you have opinions about the parking situation, one, listen to the people who overwhelmingly through their survey responses say it's tight. Tell the city you like the visioning plan, but you want to keep the parking where it is until another parking study is done to prove us wrong, I guess. And just send that clear message along, because otherwise I fear that the inertia of this process will lead us back here in a year and you'll be being told that you gotta do 0.5 because you voted for the visioning plan. And I kind of jumped around a little bit more than I planned to, but last point, I wouldn't put too much stock in the Iowa City parking ratios because they have 4 ramps in their downtown district. 6. I said 4 last time, I was wrong. They have 6. 3,635 spots. So unless you're willing to make that kind of an investment on the Hill to be the parking sink for customers coming in from other parts of the city, I would really think twice about underparking the residential and underparking the commercial. It's just not going to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishan. Do we have any other public comments? Name and address, please.
Andrea Geary, 1816 Tremont Street. I'm also with Becky and Chris and Catherine with the College Hill Partnership.
Be sure the mic's right in front of your face, sorry.
How's that, better? Also on the College Hill Partnership Board. I've lived in the neighborhood since 2007 with my kids and own a business there as well since 2016. And I was the one last time who over Zoom listed off the litany of questions and concerns about participation of Black, Indigenous people of color in the process. And while I think some time being devoted to the issue and to my concerns, I do want to just point out this evening, the city has spent maybe 2.5 minutes saying essentially, there is no racism here. A bunch of white people looked at it and there was no racism here. And then we spent about 25 minutes talking about parking. So I do feel very strongly that we need to sit down and just like pump the brakes and think about who was engaged in the process. I believe in the packet for this evening, which I don't have in front of me, it says specifically that the city did not engage, while the outreach effort did not specifically seek out marginalized populations, one of the goals was to create a process that was welcoming to all. And, you know, I think the reality is that in Cedar Falls, you and I might feel welcome. Feels like a very welcoming community to me. I've lived here forever. But I'm white, you know, and I know for a fact it doesn't feel welcoming to a lot of people. A lot of my friends don't feel welcome here. They don't come here. So I think we need to stop, put the brakes on, and really look hard at engaging directly, going out of our way to ask folks who are not white, you know, how can we move forward and be able to comfortably say that Cedar Falls is a community that welcomes all intentionally? Because at this point, voting to approve this plan without any input, intentional input from Black, Indigenous people of color, I feel it's disingenuous to be able to say that Cedar Falls is a welcoming community for all, because we haven't gone out of our way. We really haven't, to make sure that that's true. So I'll leave it at that. I hope I can leave my questions from last week if you guys want to look at them. That they're all still the same. Nothing's changed. So
I guess my question would be,
yeah,
what would be that process? I mean, I think it's a really good question, but I really don't understand.
Yeah,
I don't know where we would go to get that additional input and what that process will look like. I mean,
right.
I thought about it quite a bit after the question was raised last time, which I thought was excellent question.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, boots on the ground. What would that process be? That's
right. No, I appreciate the dialogue, and I'm a baker by trade, so I don't know that I'm qualified to answer that question. But I think all of us here are engaged in the political process, right? Like, I watch city council meetings for fun. That's my social life. Not everybody is into getting involved in civics, and I do know we made a huge effort to reach out to, in general, the people of Cedar Falls. But there are a lot of people who don't do this for fun and who don't do it, after work, come over and pop into a city council meeting. So I think it's finding the experts. I think it's finding people who are Black, Indigenous people of color and asking them, how do we pop into your network? How do we find more info? How do we get more feedback in a large group setting? Yeah, it's a good question. Because I do want to say, I'm proud to live in Cedar Falls, and my friends feel welcome here. My friends feel safe here. And I honestly can't say that right now. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrea.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other public comments? We have one online? Oh, Mary. Bring it back to Mary.
I appreciate Mr. Vajpayee's comments, and I feel like some things, I feel like he and I are saying many of the same things, because I want to reiterate, we showed those numbers, not that those are what any future ratio should be, and I also want to reiterate that one of the big issues is whether the parking is required on-site or off-site, and I think I said that before. And another really important question is, if more parking is needed, who is it needed for, who provides it, who pays for it, and where is it located? And those are all really important questions. I'm not denying any of those questions. I think they all have to be considered. But last but not least, any developer, property owner, et cetera, who wants to provide more parking, if they feel like they need that amount of parking for their business to be viable, for their apartments to be rentable, they should provide as much that they feel like they need. But the question is the city requiring people to provide more than they need? And the question is, if they don't have enough, does it flow onto the streets? That's one of the things I think I highlighted at the very beginning is if you don't want the parking to be on the street, et cetera, because students with cars want to park across the street from campus and they don't need a car all the time, but they have that space. Those are all really, really important questions, and they have to be factored in to any changes in the parking. And then the last point we recommended was, if you make an initial move, you need to monitor it, just like now that the lots have adjusted and the city enforcement has changed. It needs to be monitored to determine, did we go far enough? Did we not go far enough? Et cetera. There are so many variables But I want to circle back, and I think Catherine mentioned this as well. There was a College Hill plan in the mid-90s that raised many of the same topics that this plan raises. There's some advancements, there's some things that we've highlighted related to future zoning, et cetera. But in general, very little redevelopment and revitalization has happened, and there must be some reason that redevelopment has been locked up and why it hasn't moved forward. And our study pointed at a handful of things that we've identified. So I just want to reiterate, the numbers in the back, yes, you could tweak it and say 2 less units and 4 more units and not exact this building, et cetera. They're just trying to get people to have an understanding of what buildings of different sizes, how much parking they require, how they could fit it on the lot, what they couldn't fit on the lot. That is what the information is. It is not saying that the parking ratio should be dropped to 0.5 per unit. So I feel like there's some talking past on the information that's there. And we were looking very much at what we were working with on College Hill and the people that we talked with, landlords, developers, students, business owners, et cetera. And we didn't put the recommendations forward lightly. So I just want to make sure that there's a lot of information there, and we can circle back and debate, decimal points of ratios. But I feel like the community doesn't want everything to stay exactly as it is right now. That was a message that we got very loud and clear.
Thank you, Mary. Any other public comments?
I'm not seeing any in Zoom.
Mr. Chair, I have just a few points of clarification as well. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware. There has been a lot of different parking requirements and changes over the many, many years. Prior to 2015, the parking ratios were just based on a number of parking spaces per unit. So in 2015, when we did the rental, we did the stabilization effort. At that point in time, that's when the ratio changed to the higher ratio that Mr. Vajpayee referred to. So there was, of course, a lot of buildings that were built in the neighborhoods. This neighborhood has long history, and of course, a lot of older buildings that don't have, the same amount of parking. So what we're trying to deal with is now and going forward. And there was a small tweak, and as you know, in 2018, 2019, when we changed it, and the one change was not to require visitor parking, because there was surface parking that was provided by the city in lots and on the street. And also the change was to not require studio apartments to have 2 parking spaces required per studio apartment. It was to create 1 parking space per bedroom and treat studio apartments as a 1-bedroom unit. So there wasn't that much there was a little bit of a tweak to the standards recently, but not maybe as drastic as was discussed.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, we're going to close public comments and bring it back to the commission for discussion.
Yeah, I would like to bring up something. In listening to all these parking studies and different things that are going on, it started out very early that someone said that people that live 10 minutes away would rather drive their car and park on the street than be 5 minutes away. It automatically tells me that apparently we're not motivating the kids in the right way. The other thing that happens is, why don't we build rental units and then make rental units for walking students only that are close enough to campus that they don't need a car? The other thing that I'd like to make a comment about is in doing a study of nice days in Iowa, okay? There are only 74 days in the year that people will look at and say, hey, it's nice to go out and take a walk. Otherwise, it's pretty bad weather. Snow, cold, wind, rain, whatever you have. But most of those good days fall during the summer. And during the summer, I don't think parking is much of a problem at the College Hill area. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I think parking is a problem, and I do believe that one of the best ways to solve it would be to build no-car rental units that don't need any parking stalls, that are right next to campus, that you only rent to walkers. Well, anyway, I'm done.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
a couple comments. I agree with Vashti in the fact that if we pass this tonight without making comments about really working on the parking issue, that the city council will come back and say, well, you did vote for this. And because I've heard that before. I've heard many times, well, you voted for it in CIP, so we're going to do it. So I really believe as a commission, we need to fully address it. I believe that this plan is great other than the parking issue. I think the parking issue has to be addressed one way or another. And so I just want to make that comment that this is a wonderful plan. I look forward to us working on it. But I do believe we do have speaking to do on that parking, and I think we can do it. So that's it.
Other comments from the commission?
I would agree. I believe that this plan is great. I believe that I believe parking in any city, no matter what the regulations are, is contentious, and no matter what we do, it will be contentious. But I do feel like the vision plan sets a reasonable standard, and like how Dr. Martin and Dr. Hallbreaker were talking about encouraging, more walkers, healthier lifestyles, et cetera. I think this plan aligns with that. In addition, with College Hill partnership, agreeing with the parking piece of that, I feel like with their support, I think that it seems that it's going in the right direction. In addition to Ms. Gurry's note about diversity and equity and access to participation with developing the College Hill plan, I do feel like the city and College Hill Partnership, we did everything that we could with promoting it, but I feel that I think it should be noted when we look at the Planning and Zoning Commission, we're all white, and that structurally should be something that we look at in the future, and with future appointments, that needs to be a greater consideration.
Thank you, Leslie. Other opinions or feedback or?
Yeah, a couple things, I guess. I think, on the parking issue, I appreciate the way I really like the vision plan overall. I think it's been a wonderful job. I understand the parking concern as a big concern. It's a big concern for me. I live close to the hill, and I know that while the parking is not totally terrible now, it's not great either, and so future development obviously can threaten that. I appreciate some of the creative ideas that have been fleshed out in the vision plan to maybe address parking in different ways. At this point, I think the vision plan is just a vision plan. The parking issues, the rubber's going to meet the road now when we look at new regulation, and I still feel that we have a fairly high need for parking, and it's got to be addressed somehow. But I think the vision plan at least points a direction for some more creative solutions that may be able to implement to actually take care of the parking and grow the hill. So I feel pretty good about the broad concepts that the plan's put together. I'm just struggling with the kind of the diversity question and how to deal with that. I would love to have something more specific have the plan and address that more specifically. I just don't know how that really gets done. You know, I've read through the plan and tried to think about that in that context. I think that's something that I would just note that we ought to be more direct, or more putting that out front when maybe we're doing some of these other things, especially with, you know, the vision plan, you can always say something, but I think it really comes down to the next step after this vision plan, when we start talking about regulations, that we look at those regulations very closely in that context, to try to do our due diligence, to do the best we can to, you know, address those kind of concerns, because that's, and they're very, you know, it's not a cut and dried thing that's easy to pick up on, but I do think that, I don't know if I want to hold up the plan, the vision plan at this point for that, because I'm not sure exactly how to go about addressing that differently at this point or at any point, unless there's somebody with, you know, some very specific ideas on steps to take. I don't know how to address that, so.
I think, Marty, I think you said it all there. You know, if I think about this, I've got 20, 30 things I'd love to talk about, but as I look at them, I'm thinking that this is when we get to that next step, when we get to looking at regulatory implications. So when I take a step back and take more of a 30,000-foot sort of view, this is a fantastic culmination of brilliant work overall. And you know, the two kind of sticking points, again, parking and you know, diversity and racial equity and so forth. I guess my thoughts, briefly, is that we give extra special effort to the parking concerns to find that balance, and in doing so, as this vision plan presumably moves into the council's hands, I would like to see just some discussion or some engagement with council, just kind of reminding them that this is sort of a decision of or a balance between development and parking, and I think we heard pretty articulately earlier that we can't have our cake and eat it too. So there's going to have to be some sort of a balance achieved. And I think it would be helpful, prior to looking at regulations down the road as a commission, if we got a little bit of feedback from council as to where they feel those priorities lie from a high level. The second thing, and I don't think that this should hold up the approval of the Magic College Hill plan, but just an idea I had, and maybe this has been done already, but I was just thinking that maybe it would be appropriate to, in some sort of form, engage the Human Rights Commission prior to getting into regulations, just so that we can consider any perspectives from that body as we look at the details of this down the road. So those are my two kind of high-level thoughts. Outside of that, I think it's fantastic and that we should move it forward.
Would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
So that's a motion to move on to City Council?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. All right, roll call vote maybe on this one, Karen?
Yes. Holst?
Aye.
Larson?
Aye.
Leeper?
Aye.
Lynch?
Aye.
Trudeau?
Aye.
Saul?
Aye.
Schrod?
Nay.
Sears?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries.
All right, thank you, and thank you for the process. It can always be improved, but we really appreciate especially during a pandemic, I think, the thoughtfulness of the process. So thank you. We will continue to get better. The next, last item on our new business is the rezoning and zoning code text amendments, which will be discussed for public hearing date.
Okay, I know we, just a few comments. The zoning code and the regulating plan were presented about a month ago to the public, and it's been up for public review since that time. And the commission has had 4 different work sessions where we've kind of gone through the different elements of the code and the new regulating plan, which is essentially the zoning map. We have received a few comments from people that we've notified everybody that lives within the district, that owns property within the study area of downtown, to let them know once again that we are considering some changes here based on the downtown vision plan. So we have heard a number of comments. The commission has asked a number of questions of the consulting team. So the next step in the process then would basically to be set a public hearing for your next meeting. At that meeting, we will try to bring forward a sort of a decision matrix with a number of those comments that were made both by the public and things that the commission have asked us to consider, little tweaks to the regulating plan in certain areas. We heard a number of different comments asking questions about maybe the process of reviewing some of those, looking at some different options for that. And then a few of the comments from various details from various people in the community. So we'll try to put that together for you so you can see all of those. And then, of course, opening it up for comments tonight and also for comments at the next, at the hearing. So that there may be other additional things that we need to look at and consider. So we would anticipate that there would be maybe a need for several meetings before we can bring that all together so that you can make good reasoned decisions on some of those tweaks to the code and to the regulating plan.
So are we taking public comments on this, or really just open the public hearing for April 7th?
So I think it's fine to open, just have initial discussion, and then if the commission has anything else that you would like staff or the consultants to know about for the public hearing, we can certainly work on those things in the interim and bring them to you next time as well.
Is there anyone to the public that would like to speak to the item?
No one in Zoom.
Okay, seeing none, bring it back to the commission. Any questions? Okay. We're entertaining a motion to open the public hearing for the April 7th meeting, is that correct?
April 14th.
14th.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would
Make a motion, we set the date for the public hearing of April 14th.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
All right, that item passes. So we'll open the public hearing. Any updates for the commission, Karen?
I don't have any updates for you tonight.
All right, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.